Yo, it's your boy Locos, and I think it's a real shame. It's a shame that we won't get a collaboration video between Asanabi and FD Signifier, but it can fully explain to us how they're able to get rich off of capitalism, but at the same time want to see it destroyed, regardless of whatever system or ideology they want to have replace it, regardless of experience, a plan, or any type of implementation won't destroy the country or the whole world. Nope, we won't get that video. But if the signifier quote unquote blessed us with the video explaining the manosphere again. And this time, how the manosphere is getting rich off of weak men. Which, if I'm being honest with you, I agree with to a certain degree. Me personally, you can do with your own money what you want. But personally, I'm not buying any guy's courses. If I need information about something, I can get it at other place. Probably for free. Whether it's finances or dating, there's plenty of sources out there. When I needed stuff regarding dating and relationships, I could go to my friends, father, or if I want to go online, Kevin Samuels, Patrice O'Neill. Finances, there's plenty of options for that. So of course, certain aspects of the manosphere I do support, other stuff I don't. Certain people I do support, other people I don't. The manosphere is a collection of a lot of different content creators and opinions. Some extremes, some logical stuff. Because you agree with some stuff in the manosphere, the red pill community, doesn't mean you agree with everything or everyone. That's a part of it. And that's should be obvious to anybody by anything. Like I said, I wouldn't buy any courses about dating. And I don't think the guy that makes these courses, or any group of guys, whether it's Fresh and Fit, Andrew Tate, I don't think they got to where they are by taking courses about how to deal with women. They had experience. They went out. They worked out. They had skills. They had money. These types of things. They didn't pay other guys money to teach them how to get with women. And that's just another reason why I won't never pay for it. I just don't think it's necessary. You're better off just living your life and approaching women and getting more confidence, especially going to the gym and getting more skills and building up a personality, than paying for a course that's telling you how to approach a woman, but you're still too afraid to actually do it yourself. You got to take that first step. No course, no guide, no book, no alpha male. It's going to really push you to do what you need to do to better your life. You got to do it yourself. But regardless of how I feel about that stuff and the courses and stuff, there's still some good stuff about the manosphere when that stuff isn't involved. But I'm not expecting any type of balanced, logical debate aside from FD Signifier. I've seen enough of his content. I'm not coming here for that. I'm coming here for the nonsense and to refute it. So let's get into it.
On May 27th, 2022, I posted a video called Dissecting the Manosphere. It was 90 minutes long, and believe it or not, it was supposed to be longer, but the deadlines and technical difficulties that I had at the time forced me to bring it out in parts. Because I had to separate time in between each video got longer until at the end of the whole project, I had 6 hours worth of talking about the manosphere.
I reacted to the top one, I think, or at least the one where he did focus on more on Kevin Samuels, and that was like 99% nonsense. It's clear that he only saw like small clips, he didn't take any context, and he already had his mind made up beforehand. So of course it was really easy to refute him or have a rebuttal for the nonsense that he was saying. And that's part of the reason why it's very hard to watch his content and react to it, because it'd be so long. And there's really not much of anything that is quality. Just because you have an opinion and you find the people in your echo chamber to agree with your opinion, that doesn't make it evident. But that's the only thing he really puts out. Similar to that T-girl or whatever that he featured on, and I was like, oh, fuck. Of course her and her stupid ideas got him to co-sign. He says it's that same idiocy too. So, nothing shocking there. But if you want to see my reaction to that, that's on the channel.
My graduate studies had engaged with the Manosphere, Redpill, incel world, and I felt like I had some pretty good and unique things to share on the topic. And I still kind of didn't want to do it. Despite that, I had a ton of people since then reach out to tell me that these videos helped them and changed the way they looked at the world of themselves. And it's amazing to hear that and to know that I could make something that helps people and affects the world in a positive way. Also, that first video has made me about $10,000 as of time of writing. Now, I would make videos for free if I had to. I literally did for about 1.5 years, and I have been helping young boys and men since I was a young man myself, as a mentor, a teacher, a social worker, 2 professions that are not known for paying well. So it's never been about the money when it comes to stuff like this. The second video, Connecting the Manosphere, has also made me a little over $10,000.
Let me know if you want me to react to the second one. I almost did because he had Aaron on there, and I just knew it's probably gonna be some bullshit nonsense. Especially when you put in Aaron and all the people that get all upset about the ending of the story. And I'm pretty sure they're gonna try to make it some type of power dynamic, patriarchy, or some bullshit like he always does, no matter what the topic is. But if you want me to react to it and dissect that word, Saddle of Chaos, let me know. I'll do it for the sake of Attack on Titan.
Since 2022. The third video, Understanding the Black Manosphere, has only made me about $5,000 because it got demonetized after a few months. I believe because I called Kevin Samuels a which he is. He was a secret Trump voter. Go watch the video for details. So aside from all the
he can vote for whatever the hell he wants. Just the same way you can vote for a crazy socialist or Marxist. Like, he voted for Trump. I don't care. I don't care. There's more factors and important things to decide a person's character besides who they vote. And no, that is not the equivalent to Hitler. Get a brain. Stop watching this dumbass content.
The help that those videos provided for a lot of people, it also definitely helped me. And, you know, kind of revealed a pattern that I think was interesting to engage with. But more than that, I'm not the only person to make Manosphere-related content or make money off of it. In fact, the most profitable creator of Manosphere content, probably in the last couple of years, is one Andrew Tate. Between 2022 and 2023, Andrew Tate emerged as the undisputed king of the Manosphere, ironically, while never actually being in charge of a single social media platform for the most part. Instead, through a pretty ingenious scheme, Tate created an online course called Hustlers University. And through this course, thousands of other channels on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter began to share any content he was connected to. All he had to do was go on the countless Redpill podcasts and do interviews and let his army of bots, literal and figuratively speaking, do the work for him. Via the subscriptions to Hustler University, Tate was said to be making millions of dollars a month, though it's hard to pin down actual numbers. And all this money was coming from mostly young men and boys drawn in by his lavish lifestyle, charismatic personality, and willingness to take advantage of their insecurities with the promise of helping them become financially independent. Oddly, despite what I just described to you, this is probably the most honest thing that Tate has done to make money since he was a kickboxer. It's fun and good to shit on Andrew Tate, but I've been thinking a lot about his role and my role in this whole content creation equation. In many ways, we have the same job description. While I, of course, have very different goals in mind and very different content overall.
Anime is great. Aaron Yeager is not. Virgin Aaron. Oh my. Oh, that just sounds like this is going to be some brain melting BS. I'm almost I might just have to react to that because that just sounds like this is going to be comedy, the stuff that he says.
At the end of the day, my target audience and the strategies I use to reach it are the same as Tate's. Our product is different, but the genre is the same. This occurred to me after watching a video from the editor of this video, Zatzman. Zatzman, a smaller creator with a genuine interest in the Manosphere and related self-help content, had this epiphany that regardless of his role in debunking Manosphere content, he was still a part of a larger apparatus that didn't seem to have a beginning or an end. And even as he was doing good work and making good content, it was still serving that bigger function at the end of the day and worked against his intentions and goals and just desire to be creative.
A little bit of an element of, utility of it, because I mean, we live in an age where everyone has access to a smartphone and the internet, and everybody can post their opinions everywhere at any time about everything. It's a little bit frustrating at times when you see the kinds of things that get popular. And like, while I can understand and empathize why those things become popular, at the same time, part of me is just like, okay, people are ridiculous. And like, it feels like you're fighting this endless fight against like human ignorance and stupidity.
Hope this statement for him would be even more funny if he was a socialist or Marxist, just like FD Fuckafire. So, I don't know, just the irony of that. Like, everybody has their opinion. Yes, of course. And not every opinion has to be your own and agree with you. Shocking. You don't think your opinion's in that same category too?
You know, I value like good, genuine criticism, like good analysis and good critique, as like art generally helps you understand yourself, how you relate to the world. But with this Manosphere content, I was just like, there's not that much to really glean from it. Once you understand sort of like the basic principles and like how to interact socially, how to carry yourself, simple basic dating advice. It doesn't matter if it's through an app or in person, etc., etc. Like the general principles stay relatively the same. There's an information threshold to this, and it feels like you're in a hot tub and you're just like in the hot tub, like with all the fluids and everything. It's just like constantly like mishing and mashing like over and over again. And eventually you prune up and you're like, okay, I gotta get out of the hot tub. I think that's a good analogy.
That's an excellent analogy. That's an excellent analogy. That bit is definitely getting in the video. This is an interesting and not overly discussed part of the whole Manosphere discourse. I don't think enough people have stopped to ask how and why the Manosphere, Redpill, MGTOW, Incel, and whatever communities work not just as social groups and social problems to be addressed, but also as a valuable economic engine for content creation and the ramifications of what that means. There's always talk about combating the Manosphere, and if I'm honest, I've never felt like framing it as a battle between two groups and online content creation made much sense. Instead, we're going to look at the Manosphere as a manifestation of bigger forces than anything we do here on YouTube or any other social media platform. And we're going to look at those forces in this bigger system and critique how all of us function in that system in order to find more efficient solutions, or at least something new and interesting to say about this problem. So yeah, there won't be a whole lot of dunks and debunks in this one, but it's still going to be a fun, informative ride. It's also going to go a lot of places. It's likely that if you're watching this, that you've already watched my other anti-Manosphere content, but I still want to review some of those core themes and add to them, because even after 6 hours worth of talking about this subject, there's still plenty of stuff that got left out. So in this section, I want to fix that. For instance, so many people see the Manosphere as a modern phenomenon, when really the only modern aspect of the Manosphere is social media. The ideals and themes and aesthetics that we see in the Manosphere today are not new. 15 or so years ago, you had Tucker Max books, Mystery the Pickup Artist, The Man Show, and those are just the ubiquitous elements that broke into the mainstream. These shows and books were anti-feminist and misogynistic, but a bit less overtly hateful toward women compared to their modern counterparts, but the framework and the ideology is still there. It's probably hard to imagine, but Manosphere pro-man rhetoric doesn't always start with misogyny and women hating, but it does inevitably end with that, unfortunately. Since the 1970s, there have been various consortiums and coalitions of men coming together to uplift men. The mythopoetic men's movement of the 1990s is where we get the concept of toxic masculinity, for example. We often see that term as something that came from feminist movements, but it was actually men who recognized the problems of compulsory and traditional male gender roles and combined it with some understanding of feminist theory to come up with something to explain that problem. One of the earliest modern bastions of a manosphere comes in the form of the men's liberation movement. And for a time, it was a very progressive, almost feminist entity with an ideology that sounds more like soy boy stuff that me and Foreign Man and Noah Samson talk about today.
Men's liberation discourse walked a tightrope from the very beginning. First, movement leaders acknowledged that sexism had been a problem for women and that feminism was a necessary social movement to address gender inequities. But they also stressed the equal importance of the high costs of the male sex role to men's health, emotional lives, and relationships. In short, they attempted to attract men to feminism by constructing a discourse that stressed how the male role was impoverished, unhealthy, and even lethal for men.
But there was eventually a schism among this group and various others, resulting basically in a split between the pro-feminist men's movement and the anti-feminist men's movement. And at the core of this split is basically what the modern manosphere is today. Both groups agree that traditional male roles and the reality of men is a problem. The pro-feminist group sees that as an issue of patriarchy and capitalism and things that, if you understand real sociological phenomenon, make a lot of sense. Men cannot
The bullshit ideology I believe in, I love how you try to sneak stuff like that in. If you agree with me, it's real. If you don't, it's fake.
not play traditional roles because the tools to play those roles are denied to them by various systems such as capitalism, etc. The anti-feminist group, however, sees the blame for this problem as a result of women and feminist movements throwing off the natural way of things. And this argument is obviously one that is often repeated today by right-wing and reactionary voices. And of course, this isn't true. When you hear people complain about how a man could get a job and take care of a family by himself 50 years ago, they always make the ridiculous leap to say it's a woman's fault, as if women are now working in those factory jobs in the 70s instead of men, or instead of recognizing that those factory jobs just don't exist in America today because of capitalism. The corporations move those jobs overseas. However, for men who still believe and identify with that traditional image of masculinity as a provider, the removal of their ability to provide creates a pretty big problem from which most of the manosphere nonsense stems from. But this is not to undermine the fact that masculinity has always been a space of conflict for men as long as inequality has been a thing. One of the best examples of this is how the argument of what's happened to the real men has been recurring over and over for like the last 100 years. There's a great Twitter thread from Paul Freire, a newspaper researcher from Calgary, where he maps out this angst about men becoming less manly all the way to the late 1800s. They're saying the exact same thing we're saying now, which begs the question, at what point has real manhood existed? And the real answer to that is kind of never. Masculinity has always been in a state of conflict, and I'd argue that this conflict is a byproduct of capitalism and the competition that capitalism requires from men in order to compete for a limited amount of resources in a system that is designed to ensure that a certain amount of men will always fail. And it's no wonder that we see a spike in manosphere activity coming out of COVID. So many men were further faced with the morbid reality of this competition, let alone the overwhelming loneliness that social distancing caused for everyone, and the manosphere offered them simple but false answers. All of this history is important because the modern image of the manosphere kind of hides the reality of what the manosphere is and does and how it functions. Most of the manosphere is just really, really weird guys and or really, really awful guys doing weird and awful things. But beyond them, the manosphere purports to be addressing real issues that men are facing, issues that men have been facing. And while they do a very poor job of it overall, it shouldn't be missed that on multiple levels, many men find themselves in the manosphere for understandable and predictable reasons.
Where men have limited economic opportunities and where there are too many men, right, you'll see more incels. Because first off, if there's too many men, then it's musical chairs, the mating market. Most people mate monogamously, and so most people aren't sharing. And so most people are going to be taken off the market as soon as they choose someone. And so that means that if there's too many men, there are going to be more men, even if all of them are perfectly marriageable, let's say, and that's not necessarily going to be true, then you're going to have more men excluded from the mating market. And this is going to get more intense if income inequality is super high, right? If scarcity is abundant at the lower end. Because frankly, it's very hard to compete on the mating market as a male if some men are millionaires and some men are broke. Now, we don't just compete financially.
Yeah, but part of what the manosphere talk about, but depending on who you discuss it with, is unrealistic expectations that certain women, of course not all, but certain women have. Like I did that video before with Urban Pre-Chat, did the visual content, and they talked about that woman saying 50K, is it enough money, you're broke? Like clearly she was ridiculous. And of course, that's not the majority of women, but those do exist. And the more people that try to defend it and not want to say anything about it, but want to focus on the men that have an issue with it and talk about it, nothing's really going to change. And you're going to keep having this issue because a lot of these women that think six figures isn't a lot, they can't even quantify, they can't even imagine how much money that really is. They don't know the actual statistics when it comes to income and that type of thing within this country or within the West. And that's, at least at the start, that's what the Red Pill and the Manosphere was about. This lack of, I don't know, this lack of understanding on both sides about the dating market and the unrealistic expectations. That does happen on both sides, but from the Manosphere perspective, it was focused on women's unrealistic expectations. Whether it's money, whether it's height, whether it's sexual stuff, all that type of stuff.
Eventually, men also compete in terms of their looks. They compete in terms of their personalities as well. That's not often talked about, but frankly, some men make great boyfriends and are super fun to be around and super positive and good company. Yeah. And some are, you know, intolerable and abusive.
I think the problem is that we like completely conflate like the worst aspect of the ideology with everybody who has any vulnerability that might make them susceptible to that ideology, and we're throwing it all into one big bucket. You have the same set of problems or the same set of initial issues: wage stagnation, social isolation, urban sprawl, lack of livable cities, blah, 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 patriarchal expectations on men that have remained despite the fact that we've kind of moved forward in society past that. Men in general, I would say, are in a position where they've not been given the socialization or the tools to move into the future of the world as it is becoming. They're still tied to a world where getting a wife or a partner is tied to a level of economic coercion over women that doesn't exist anymore.
In the midst of what society has become, they are rallying against the future, right? Like they are yes. explicitly saying and electing to make a choice that, like, I want life to be this way. I want to live in this patriarchal reality. I want to call the shots. I want a woman that does XYZ in the vein of this 1950s era kind of bullshit. And if you look at the study on it, a lot of it is like men are making less money than they used to and women are making more money than they used to. I promise you that if you back off that bullshit, women will more than meet you halfway in regards to economic situations.
Here's another aspect of the manosphere that is often overlooked. You ever notice that many of the most visible actors in the broader manosphere tend to be men of color? Andrew Tate is half black. Sneeko is Haitian and South Asian. Fresh and Fit are North African and Afro-Caribbean respectively. Kevin Samuels is obviously black. Hamza is Pakistani. And even going back to earlier eras, you have guys like Roosh V and Tariq Nasheed. This is an interesting thing to notice that often is glossed over. The manosphere is greatly a white phenomenon, but that's mostly just by the sheer numbers of white men on the internet. The visible, most popular parts of the manosphere have always been men of color, I believe because white men had to maintain a pristine image of moral virtuousness and progressiveness that they cannot be as openly anti-feminist and misogynistic. Something like the manosphere that builds itself on this regressive, misogynistic, patriarchal imagery just can't effectively tie itself to white masculinity, because that would conflict directly with the way
the video, I swear, how many brain cells does he have where everything has to be tied to race and this and the other? I can't imagine living such pathetic of a life that I can't look around, go outside my door without thinking, oh, a white man, how is he oppressing me today? I don't know how yet. I haven't discovered how yet, but when I do, trust me, I got some trauma that's weighing up for me. Like, Jesus Christ, every single thing. And just because you like the manosphere or you watch manosphere doesn't make you misogynistic or sexist, patriarchal, power hungry, evil, gaslighting, any of these other labels that they just throw out there. But now, if you do have actual beliefs that are, piece of shit beliefs, that's different. But, partaking in some type of content doesn't make you any of those things that this capitalist loving, while hating, socialist, Marxist gotta say. Trust me. There's a lot of people, there's 8 billion people on the planet. Really don't let this guy of all people make you feel bad about yourself.
racism and white supremacy works. You can't have the image of misogyny and patriarchy be white men, even as the predominantly white men.
Wait, what?
Image of misogyny and patriarchy be white men.
Wait, half the time in your OIQ videos and many of the similar leftist stuff I hear, it's always about making about evil white men and old white men and white men this, white men that. Just like in the video that I just did with him talking about NFL players, talking about the evil white NFL owners. Like, I've seen plenty of videos and discourse and content where people was openly making white men the villain. I don't think there's any issue or fear with doing that and calling them misogynists and calling them all the other BS labels you just throw out like a deck of cards. So, unless I'm misunderstanding what he's saying, I'm not seeing any issues or no trepidation about labeling white men a certain type of way.
Even as the predominantly white male-ran Republican Party and Supreme Court seek to undermine and gut women's rights at every turn, even the white men that populate the greater manosphere take on more intellectual veneers or maintain.
Bro, because he's a psychologist, and I'm willing to bet he knows a lot more about economics and society than you do. I'm much more willing to bet on that. It's not because he's white, it's because he can actually hold a conversation and debate. Something you're clearly too cowardly to do, which it's been proven over and over again. So yes, I'm much rather, and I'm much more grateful. I discovered Jordan Peterson way before the Red Pill stuff. When I listened to Jordan Peterson the first time on Joe Rogan, it was just a discovery of the politics, societal fact that's going on that I wasn't aware of. None of the Red Pill, none of this other nonsense. I don't even consider Jordan Peterson for the Red Pill. Me and Ram had this conversation earlier, and Jordan Peterson isn't like a Red Pill guy. He just give advice and talk about certain things with men. That doesn't automatically make you Red Pill.
Anonymity, while their BIPOC peers tend to be more flamboyant and bombastic, and thus they thrive in the attention economy. So there's some weirdness going on there, but it shouldn't betray the fact that the manosphere as a whole is genuinely racially diverse. I've spoken at length about the Black manosphere, but there's also the phenomenon of Asian American participation as well. I won't go into it more. I'll leave some further reading in the description. But the point,
my God, I don't. Every single thing. What's the demographics? What's the race? What's the influence of race on this? How can I make this an oppressive racial thing? If I can't make it that, I'll make it economic. Like, bro, every time people like him talk, he just further proves the stuff that Jordan Peterson was saying back in 2017 and 16 when I first discovered them. How they just transferred the same Marxist stuff about economics over to the rest with race. And that's all they can talk about because that's the only thing their mind can process. Like, seriously. I can't imagine throwing away my brain and my life listening to him, and it's not for the sake of this channel, and actually buying the bullshit that he says.
The point of bringing this up is to show that the manosphere is diverse because the hegemonic ideal of what masculinity is or needs to be centers around explicit traditional ideals of what a good man is or what a good life for a man should be. And these traditional ideals almost always center around conservative stoic images of masculinity.
What the fuck? The Wolf of Wall Street isn't a good man or what a man should be. He literally stole money from people using like penny stocks and tricking them. At no point in the movie, from my memory, he came off like a good guy. At best, he was an anti-hero. But I wouldn't even call him that because he was just a villain. Straight up villain. He did horrible stuff to the people that trusted him with his money. He screwed over his friends, from my memory, so he couldn't go to prison, I think. Except for Jonah Hill's character. And like, didn't he hit his wife, Margaret Robbie, the character she played? If not that, if he did, I'm pretty sure he did. I'm 95% sure he did. That time he got drunk and he tried to drive away or take her. She was leaving him and he thought she was taking the kid, and he like got in the car accident with the kid in his like driveway area. Like, at no point in that movie was me 14, 15, 16 years old seeing him as stoic, a good person of morality, anything like that.
Sexuality, and gender. So all of these men are chasing the same overall goals and aesthetics, and the manosphere tells them that they know how to help them get there. Or in the case of red pills, black pills, incels, etc., it tells them who to blame for them not being able to get there. And that belies one of the core problems, that the manosphere is telling boys and men how to be a thing that doesn't exist. It just genuinely doesn't exist for most men out there in the world. And my perception is that that's what often brings about the most toxic behavior, because imagine chasing something that you're constantly being told is real, and you're being told that you can get it if only this thing happens, if only you buy this course.
Like a successful Marxist utopia. How many times we're going to have to keep trying to sell that to the population and it not working? How many people got to die for that? So you can relate to the red pill FD signifier.
Or if only these women or queer people or whatever stop doing insert X thing. This creates a paradox which brings us frustration, bitterness, and dysfunction. And all of that is not new. But today it is more volatile, more organized, more toxic, and more widespread. Men have always had these same problems, and many men have always blamed women for these problems, but we haven't always had the modern manosphere to collect and organize those individuals together. And therein lies the key that I think is most interesting to talk about here. We know a nice bit about why young boys and men come to the manosphere, but we don't know a lot about why they stay or why they leave, and more importantly, who benefits from their presence within these online spaces, and how all of that makes the entire situation much worse. I'm kind of an expert on the manosphere at this point, which probably isn't saying a lot.
Hell nah. If he's an expert on the manosphere, who was that kid that was lying and saying that he was a doctor and he got caught? He was like 19, 20 years old, like a young black kid. Like if you're an expert, then he's a doctor. There ain't no fucking way I'm gonna say, oh yeah, if you want to learn about the manosphere, check out this guy. No. Hell no. Bringing on people that already agree with your echo chamber does not mean you have evidence or logic to back you up.
There isn't a ton of research on the manosphere for various reasons. One which I alluded to in my first manosphere video, which is that there's an overall reticence to study men as a troubled population from an explicitly gendered standpoint, or God forbid, to study white men as an explicit population and not just as a default population to measure everyone else against. I vividly remember being in grad school in maybe 2014, telling one of my professors that I wanted to study Gamergate, and she was like, "What's that?" And as I explained it to her, I saw her eyes roll in the back of her head. She told me to consider finding something more significant to study. A year later, Elliot Rodger would commit the first of several incel-related shooting sprees in the last decade. Thankfully, today, the topic is being taken more seriously, but it takes a while for academia to fully dig into a new topic, so there just isn't a lot of research on the manosphere. Hence, there's a pretty low bar for being an expert on the manosphere. But to remedy this, I actually did a little bit of independent research. And I'm going to talk about that research in the next section, but I want to be clear, this is not academic level research. I actually have a real background in academic and professional research and design, and this was not that. There was no review board, there was no oversight and development of these questions or appropriate ways to identify and collect the population sample or a cleaning of the data. Real academic surveys can take weeks, months, maybe even years to develop over time. I literally made this in a day. So as I talk about these findings, understand that they rank low in the scale of empirical quantitative research, all right? Unlike other times, do not cite me on this. That said,
people cited him before.
I found some interesting shit here. So I posted this survey on Men's Lib, a Reddit board dedicated to healthier engagement with discussing masculinity and the problems of men. I highly suggest for those of you looking for a more productive, healthy community of men to talk to while trying to figure shit out. I also sent it to Redpill Exit and Incel Exit, two other Reddit boards with self-explanatory names, and I posted it on my YouTube channel page. And the goal was just to collect that info from as many places as possible, not so much the manosphere itself, but its former members. Before doing this research, I had a few theories and typologies on what I expected to find. My first theory is that most men and boys in the manosphere spend a relatively short time there, that guys may have a manosphere phase and then grow out of it, which also makes me believe that the most active and evangelical members of the manosphere are younger men, or boys essentially, who don't have a lot of real experience or perspective on what manhood and masculinity might look like. So they might be more impressed by the bizarre behavior of an Andrew Tate or a Fresh and Fit. But overall, I think older men tend to find the antics and behavior of men in the Manosphere to be ironically emasculine and undesirable.
Get out.
That is true. I'll agree with that. When they're like screaming and going crazy, or when Myron's putting on the KKK hood for no damn good reason at all that I can possibly conceive of, I think that's pretty stupid and embarrassing, and it's pretty much going against everything they say about men being able to control their emotions and women can't. Like, I don't know how you can say something like that, but at the same time do something so stupid or lash out or get angry. Like the videos when you're going back and forth with Albert Preach. A lot of that stuff, oh yeah, like going after Preacher's wife. That's some whole shit. That's something I expect from I'm just being honest, that's what I expect from like an angry, bitter, spiteful woman to do. I don't expect that from you, especially how much you talk about control your emotions and how women can't. Like, nah, that's just not something I can slide. And I know people that have let that stuff slide. I think Daquan Wiltshire, he Fresh Fit could do almost fucking anything. He ain't gonna fuck. He gonna keep riding with them till the wheels fall off. So certain people will allow anything to happen, no matter how much you talk about control yourself, discipline, being temperate, all that stuff. Like, nah. That's why I don't take Fresh and Fit seriously, even though they may say some things that I do agree with, and that does make sense. That doesn't mean everything they do is, supportable or good or positive, but, a broken clock strikes right twice a day. You know what I'm saying?
Get out of here, bro. You're here as an opportunity. Get out of here. Get out.
Get the megaphone. Get the megaphone.
You ugly. You see now? I don't want. I just. This is the worst.
Further, over time, most men within a normal range of life and behavior will figure out that women are not as bad as the Manosphere tries to present them, and recognizes that the Manosphere's energy and rhetoric will always make the distance between them and women much further.
Or you could just use your brain and understand that you see that these type of women exist, avoid them. See the red flags, don't get caught up on she like you or having the chance to have sex with her. You see the attitude, you see the mindset, leave it alone.
Real men, while still capable of misogyny and harm toward women, find the type of rhetoric and behavior they see in the Manosphere embarrassing to associate with. A really good example of this can be found in a relationship between Andrew Schultz and Fresh and Fit. Andrew Schultz is no progressive, leftist, feminist figurehead. He's a relatively strong reflection of normal male attitudes towards social issues. And when Fresh and Fit came on the Flagrant 2 podcast, him and his co-host mostly said, "You guys sound like idiots."
So whether you like it or not, people are looking at you as a role model. You guys have established yourselves as role models. From simps to pimps, which is another motto I find kind of corny, but I looked into what you guys are about. And a lot of the shit is just childish, which is fine if you want to be funny. We just talk about how doctors ain't shit for 45 minutes. We are not in any way life coaching. We are not in any way trying to help men outside of, hey, come have a laugh for a couple hours. Right. If you're going to paint yourself as life coaches and then say shit like, I just don't really fuck with black girls.
I guess. And since then, they've had an ongoing, although minor feud between Fresh and Fit, this loser duo, and Schultz and his partner on the Flagrant 2 podcast, who are much, much bigger, much, much more popular.
You asked me if we watched their podcast. I'm a 40-year-old man who's happy. Why would I watch that podcast?
Bro, man. I only watch it when I'm fighting with my wife. I feel like, these guys get me. These guys understand, bro. They understand women.
And when you go and you look at the comments from that video, you kind of get an idea of how normal, everyday guys think about the Manosphere and their big-time avatars. Guys in the Manosphere are of a unique breed. Most men in the Manosphere spend only a limited time there, somewhere between 6 months to a year, I hypothesize. To further explain this, I break down the Manosphere participants into 3 specific types. First, there's the users. These young men and boys come for a specific purpose, such as learning how to dress better or improving their conversational abilities, social coaching, etc. Skills that once they master, they don't really have a reason to stick around much longer. Because they're looking for specific things, they also don't participate as much in the larger, broader community.
Yeah, that's what mostly how my little experience with the Manosphere. Like, I wanted more confidence. I wanted to get back focused. So I started going back to the gym. I started doing all the things that I needed to make my life better and my relationships better. And I got that from Patrice O'Neal, who was a comedian, and Kevin Samuels. But I didn't go to a whole bunch of other different random people. I didn't soak up every single bit of Redpill content I could get because I didn't need to. I didn't want to. I have many other interests besides, Redpill content or relationships, whether it's history or it's all the other stuff I don't talk about on this channel. So I do fall within that category, and I really don't care about being involved in the community. I have my own group of friends. Me, Ram, our close friends, like people we grown up with. So, and I understand that's not the case for most guys. So of course you're gonna try to use that to shit on guys, but I can understand why some guys can get in these communities because they might not have friends for whatever reason. Maybe because they're shy, maybe because I don't know, they're just very isolated. Because of work, school, they don't have the social skills, and then that could lead to the dark path. Their extremes, like hating women, truly being misogynistic, and not just the way they just throw it out there. Like bullshit like that. Blaming women for why you can't get a date besides looking in the mirror. Issues like that I can't, excuse. I don't think you can blame that on women, that you can't get a date. You can't force a woman to date you. You shouldn't want to force a woman to date you. I can only imagine a guy that's never got a woman to date him would be cool with that. So I find that stuff pretty ridiculous. You gotta work on yourself.
They're much more likely to be connected to the more peripheral figures I mentioned earlier, or spaces like nofap and pickup artistry. This also means they're not as evangelical about the Manosphere, nor do they identify with it as much as a part of their identity. They're just looking to find some things that might help them accomplish a goal they have in mind. And this makes it easier for them to get out when the getting is good.
The issue is kind of what you were addressing, which is the real social world is scary. I imagine that the vast majority of people who are incels are probably similar to me when they're just very risk averse when it comes to like approaching and talking to people. They don't want some random guy walking up to them and bothering them and things like that. My case is a little bit unique because I actually didn't care too much about rejection. I know a lot of people do. But even still, I'm going to have similar problems because I was talking myself out of going up to these people. And it just resulted in me not getting experience, me not even trying. And then in many of these cases, I would later figure out these people wanted me to talk to them. These people wanted me to do these things.
I have my own struggles with like understanding relationships and closing and stuff like that with girls. But I just kind of power through it. But I remember the first time I tried shit I learned from like the game at like a nightclub. You know what I'm saying? And it worked. Right? Yeah. Like it worked. I got numbers from that night. I remember that.
Yeah, it's basically like a lot of those people would just like tell you like, go out, socialize, meet people, which is again like good, like healthy thing. Back in my mind, it felt like a little bit weird and almost predatory in a sense because you're supposed to be focusing on like meeting women and like, quote unquote hitting on women. But part of my mind was just like, well, if I was like really a sociable person, like I would interact with like anybody. I'd just be out with some buddies having a good time and like you mingle and like that's how people normally meet people. Right. And like really like when you're out in a social environment you can literally talk to anybody. It's just about having sort of like a social awareness or acuteness and like knowing how to interact and deal with inevitable rejection. The point I was getting to earlier, it's like I was talking to one of the coaches and basically he says like 90% of the people who get into sort of like seduction or PUA get out of it. Like there's a big turnover. It's like 90% get out of it in a year because they meet somebody or they learn how to, get good with women and like they learn like how to properly socialized.
Zatzman and Irrelevant, who I talked to for this video, might be examples of people that you might consider users, although I don't think either was necessarily a member of the Manosphere. Both dealt with challenges socializing, dealt with challenges in their romantic experiences, and found the world of men's self-help as a recourse. I even have admitted to reading the game back in the early 2000s after a bad breakup. We often stereotype and malign men's self-help, and rightfully so. There are numerous pitfalls to where this stuff leads. We also stereotype the type of men who struggle socially or with intimacy as overweight basement dwellers with poor hygiene, but this just isn't accurate. If you go peruse any incel or manosphere-related message board where guys want you to rate them, you'll see a lot of guys that aren't so bad looking, at least to the point where their looks are the key problem that they're facing in improving their dating life. But it's hard to get them to see that, which usually puts them in our second category. The second category is what I call the truthers. They come to the Manosphere with less explicit goals. Sometimes they just wander into it from other anti-feminist, anti-SJW spaces or content creators. Sometimes they start out with a goal the same as a user might, but end up sticking around, possibly because they can't find or activate on the resources that they might find in that earlier self-help section, which forces them to dive in deeper to explain what they're dealing with. This has the byproduct of making them build a stronger affinity toward the rhetoric and the community they engage with. Community is a highly underrated aspect of the Manosphere that I'll talk about a bit later, but these guys stay a little longer, which means it often takes a whole lot more effort to change and pull them out. Positive developments such as a new romantic success or a new community or a new friend group or some type of other intervention might pull them out. Also, over time, they might recognize that the toxic rage cycle that the Manosphere pulls them into is probably not good for them. They get disillusioned with the variety of internal inconsistencies and the constant infighting and the public derision for associating with such a toxic group and leave out of boredom or shame. This is the group that might even be reachable through a YouTube video or even a debate that exposes them to better ways of thinking about their issues and hopefully better ways of dealing with them. This group is probably the largest or maybe the most visible part of this community and probably spends up to a year or more in the community. And then lastly and most concerningly is the lifers. This is basically the previous group, except much, much worse. Their vulnerability to Manosphere rhetoric is stronger or enhanced by other factors such as their appearance, difficulties improving their economic or social standing, and possibly even genuine behavioral or mental disabilities, along with the absence of forces and resources that will get them out. They don't have a strong support system that can see what they're going through and figure out a way to get them to the other side. They're mostly just stuck in whatever environment they're in. For these folks, they begin to really identify with the rhetoric and accept it as their truth and move with it in perpetuity, attaching themselves to the community because that community might be the only one that they actually have access to.
And that sounds very similar to what I see like on Twitter, whether it be the SJW, the trans movement, people needing to put flags in their name and titles or pronouns, and which is funny because you know how much he supports that type of stuff. But yes, it's a very similar thing. People attaching themselves to ideologies or ways of thinking or movements, and that's their identity. It's not that they agree with it and they can defend it at any way that a person comes at them. It doesn't matter if they do something wrong. They're not going to leave because they feel like they're leaving the only type of friendship, community, people that they can relate to that they probably ever had in their life, or at least for a very long time. And honestly, that is pretty sad. So I'm not going to, shit on them for that. But that doesn't mean them doing certain things or agree with certain things is okay or correct. That's all I'm saying. But what he's saying is true. Certain people get in these type of communities, whether it's this, whether it's the SJW thing I said earlier, and all them like little groups and stuff like that. Everybody does it. But not everybody, but every argument, every ideology have people like that take it too far. Where it's not just about you believe in this and this is why. This is who you are. This ideology, this belief is who you are. Whether it's Marxism, trans stuff, anything at all.
Considering that the modern Manosphere is only 10 to 15 years old, it's hard to say just how long lifers stay in the Manosphere. there's a prominent member of the Black Manosphere who's in his 70s. Rollo Tomasi and Coach Greg Adams and others are men who are clearly in their 50s, and they have fans that have been with them since day one, way back in the mid-2000s. So who knows how long lifers actually stick around. So this typology is something that I had mostly figured out before doing my little survey based off my academic research and my experience observing this community. So how did these hypotheses line up with my bootleg research though? My survey had nearly 2,000 responses, which is a really good sample regardless of the quality of the questions. My first question was, what age did you first encounter the Manosphere? To which the vast majority, over 40% of the respondents, said that it was in their teenage years between 13 and 17. With the next largest group being 18 to 23. Those groups together made up 70% of the respondents. And of course, this should have been expected considering the population that has access to YouTube and Reddit to begin with. Again, not a perfect survey. Most respondents spent 1 to 2 years consuming Manosphere content, and around 70% of the respondents spent 2 years or less consuming the content. Meaning that, as I predicted, most people don't actually spend a lot of time in the Manosphere, which makes a lot of sense when you think about the way that Manosphere content works and how it often works in cycles. The Manosphere big figures of 10 years ago are not big figures today, and the ones that are big figures today won't be big figures 10 years from now.
Well, and also you think about like any interests or anything you decide to put your time into. Unlike certain other topics, like for me, military history, I'll never be able to get to the end of my fascination with military history. There's so much to learn, there's so much nuances, not to mention political, economic roles that play in it too. But the Manosphere is really focused on relationships, making yourself better. Once you get the tools to do those things, if that's what you're coming there for, there's really no reason to stick around. I don't know, I just don't see the reason to stick around and be a hardcore guy of the Manosphere for a very long time. Especially not the current iteration. Maybe if Kevin Samuels was still around and he was still talking about, bringing families together, that's different. But of course, FD Signifier, he just lump them all together. It take a lot of brain power to, separate people. But either way, I don't understand just sticking around the Manosphere for so long where it's going beyond getting the stuff you need to improve your life. It's going like a crutch. And it's a similar thing to like buying OnlyFans. It's already bad enough that you spend so much money on buying corn, but it's 10 times worse when you're doing it to get some type of emotional connection with this woman who is texting dozens and dozens of other guys with similar topics as the one you're talking about. There's no genuine connection there. I just don't understand it.
According to my survey, less than 10% of Manosphere consumers spend more than 5 years consuming this content and participating in Manosphere spaces. So far, my prior research and this survey kind of line up. In fact, most of this survey validated what I assumed up until this point. I had questions about why you came, and it showed that it was about, improving masculinity and learning how to attract women. The most popular space that the respondents participated in was Redpill spaces. There are a lot of responses connected to negative views about women. Again, this survey isn't up to academic standards, but I'm confident that any of you enterprising gender studies folks watching, if you wanted to do something like this for a master's thesis,
Jesus Christ.
you probably find similar results. That said, the survey revealed something that I wasn't expecting, that I didn't really think about that population of truthers or maybe lifers, that if in any way accurate is really horrifying in its ramifications. What I found in my data is that the Manosphere seems to have the strongest, most lasting hold on boys who encounter it at a younger age. In analyzing the study, there's a clear pattern that shows that the older an individual was when they first encountered the Manosphere, the shorter their length of participation is. And again, this corresponds with my earlier argument, but that also has a really scary counterpoint, which is that as the age of the first encounter with the Manosphere goes down, the amount of time they spend associating and consuming this content goes up.
Well, of course, if they're younger, they're still in school, they have more free time. They have less interactions with the actual women because the only people they can talk to is girls their age, which are probably too shy or fearful of to actually talk to. So they really have no idea about actual life experience because they're so young. So of course they can stick around longer because they have more time to actually take in the content before they actually, I don't know, test it out or see if it matches up with the real world. So, of course.
When I isolate for those who encountered the Manosphere at 12 years or younger, the amount of respondents that spend 5 years or more consuming Manosphere content triples, which means that there are young men in this survey that went through most of puberty and are entering into young adulthood whose entire understanding of masculinity and manhood is informed by the Manosphere. They have no experience of being even just pubescent boys without having Andrew Tate type shit in the back of their head. More disturbingly, those
But part of the reason why they went to the red pill is because they was filled up with the Disney bullshit that most guys and women nowadays are filled up with. So let's not act like, oh, I don't understand why guys are going to see it or it's something wrong with them. Like, there's a reason for it. And there's, nuggets of truth within the Manosphere. A little bit more than nuggets. There's some truth within the Manosphere, but of course not everything. I don't agree with everything. Obviously.
Slightly less significant in the data is that participation in those more concerning and toxic areas of the Manosphere, such as incel and black pill spaces, also has a small but noticeable increase the younger the person was when they first encountered the Manosphere. So there are young men identifying with incel and black pill ideology that literally haven't had time to even try to date. I've been racking my brain to try to make sense of this. And to be clear, there's some reasonable explanations. For one, this is a small part of the sample size. Only I think 200 respondents encountered the Manosphere before the age of 12. And that always will skew the way data looks.
And the Manosphere really mostly blew up over the past 5 years or so. So, of course, it's going to be much more limited. And yeah, if you're 12, if you were 12 years old when right before COVID happened, of course you're going to get exposed to all this stuff. And like we just said, him and I just said, you're not old enough to have experience, can't go out and date freely in the world like the guy Andrew Tate and Fresh and Fit are currently doing. And they're giving you their background or experience or their perspective on it from their experience. So yeah, of course you're gonna be in there longer. And you're less developed. You're less mature. You're still going through puberty. You still have all that anger or emotions and testosterone, all this stuff going through you. You're not used to it. You can't control it yet. So of course you're gonna be more gullible for the incel type stuff, for the men go their own way stuff. If you're you're under 12, or you're not even 21, if you're not even 40, you're talking about some men going their own way in black pill, I think you're crazy. I really don't understand just giving up. 12 years old, that's just ridiculous. That's beyond ridiculous. You have no idea what you're trying to give up on yet. You actually try to give it up. You never even been with the woman. You might not have gotten kissed yet, but you're agreeing with it. I think it's more so just group think, echo chamber, and want to fit in with the community and trying to seem cool. They're kids. They're young. They don't know any better. Stupid.
And this question in and of itself might have had the unintended effect of identifying the most extreme cases. Still, even if these are outlier cases, they still exist, and extrapolated to the greater population, we're talking about a lot of young boys being targeted and harmed by the Manosphere at a very early age. And
I have to mention this in the Setsuya video, but it seems so funny how he cares so much about young boys and all this stuff now, but he'll make an excuse for Setsuya shaking her ass and doing all this whole shit, and little girls and young boys having to listen to that music and that trash. But he's a paragon of logic and sense.
Harmed in profound ways that we really don't even understand yet. When you think about how YouTube and social media works, this is how it always works. It makes sense that there would be a very young population encountering this content because this content is mostly there for them. I think sometimes we overplay how widespread and dangerous the Manosphere itself is. Although it's pretty damn awful, so much of it is, bullshit, weird guys, insular communities, and maybe a handful of insecure dudes that are just trying to figure out how to talk to girls better. It's not ideal, but considering the grand scope of things, those elements are not going to have such an awful impact on society.
I always find it so funny how much quote unquote guys like him or certain women have such an issue with the manosphere, but they have no issue with the bullshit that we hear and see from women on a daily basis. They won't talk about Derrick Jackson lying to women and stealing their money, selling them nonsense. Why he did the exact opposite of what he said. But you know, he can come up with 20 hours of his bullshit theories about the manosphere. Well, 95% bullshit. Of course, there's some nuggets of truth, but mostly nonsense.
Society as a whole or those particular individuals. But if you're encountering this stuff at 12, 13, 14 years old, while your literal brain chemistry is still developing and you're seemingly more likely to involve yourself in spaces with more extreme and dire rhetoric.
I wonder if he feels that same way about leftists, SJWs, people with those extreme rhetoric. I wonder if he get that same feeling about indoctrinating students and making them believe like them and, oh, you're trans and all that stuff. I wonder if he had that same energy or if he thinks, oh no, they're just expressing themselves and they should be allowed to do it. Or he's a hypocrite. I'm pretty sure he's a hypocrite.
That's scary. That should really bother us all. That's an awful thing happening to young boys right now that there's no protection from, let alone the rest of the people, specifically young girls and eventually older women that are going to be in contact with these boys. And the thing I really want to hone in on from this is that all of these Manosphere Red Pill channels know that their biggest and most reliable consumers are children, little boys who don't know any better. They can see it in their metrics. We can see it from how their followers behave, the things they find funny, and so many of the interactions they have with their fans. It's always little ass boys that they're drowning with this misogynistic rhetoric. Now, I'm extrapolating this from my own imperfect survey, but I also found one paper that discussed narratives from incel red pill exit. And this study discussed numerous respondents who were in their early teens when they began consuming content. A survey from the Anti-Defamation League on incels showed that 8% of the respondents were under the age of 18, but this is their age at the time of the survey, not the age in which they were actually consuming the content, which probably could tell you that they were probably consuming it much earlier. But even just the common sense to know that YouTube and TikTok definitely have incredibly large audiences of teens and younger children. And we know that this is where much of this content lives and spreads. And when I think
they have corn, all types of nonsense on these social media apps, but I'm supposed to be scared and up in arms because of these kids, unfortunately, watching the Red Pill community. I agree they too young. They really need to be focused on just living their life and wait until they're like in college if they want to consume this content when they're a little bit more developed. But I don't know, it just seems pretty funny. You don't give a shit about the kids because I don't see no videos. You're the fence sexy red and all that whole shit, no matter what. But this is such a pressing, alarming thing that we need to get a move on it.
Think about that. We actually have to start taking it out of the Manosphere content creator economy and take it to the actual platforms that they're creating this stuff on. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc. all control what is on their platform. They know who's watching what, and they know the type of content that is spreading on their sites. It's ironic that the right wing has this groomer panic that they're using all the time about trans visibility and rainbow flags in school classrooms, yet in those same classrooms, there are young people watching Andrew Tate videos on TikTok and nobody's saying a damn thing. The biggest groomers in danger.
Well, how would the governors and such know that a kid is watching Andrew Tate on a cell phone? First of all, the kid probably shouldn't be having a phone in class to begin with. So, you know, if they just make sure he doesn't do that, that would be fits. So, I don't understand his point right there, but okay.
Just to our children and their well-being are giant tech companies and the proprietary and secretive algorithms that they use to target, capture, and hold young boys in content bubbles that literally feed off their negative emotions all the way to the bank.
One of the negative parts of it for me kind of comes from the left, less so from the people, but from the psychological effect of like creating content this critical of the manosphere as a man in a way that's kind of, it follows the general trend of commentary YouTube where you're just making fun of some weird shit you found. I think it can be counterintuitive for the men watching, but also for just playing the hits to an audience. Like there's a incentive where if I go to make a video, I am way more tempted to joke about something, to be like, what the fuck is that guy saying? That engagement, it's incentivized, and I don't like regret it at all. But over time, I've been like, yeah, the way this industry works very much skews towards capital production over genuine art or genuine engagement with these ideas in a political context.
Okay. I think it's a good stopping point. My brain isn't fried yet, but you know, you gotta be careful of Signify. You can only take in certain amounts of its stuff, or you probably literally go brain dead. Truly, it's very hard. I might listen to like an 8-hour podcast. I'm telling you, man, the length of content is never the issue. It's the substance and the quality. I can listen to Dan Carlin talk for 18, 24 hours about any time period of history, and I'm good with no video, no stimulation, that type of way. I can just listen to this. I feel like I'm just getting beat over the head and I'm losing my mind. Truly. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm gonna keep pushing through for the sake of you guys and for the sake of, you know, giving out rebuttals. Because, you know, you're not gonna debate anybody. I take out your balls. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe. It's your boy Locos, and I'll see you next time. Peace.